Hey everybody, how's everyone doing? It's Tuesday here, and welcome to another episode of the Remax Facebook Live interview, The Voices in Real Estate. This live interview will take place weekly for viewers in the real estate industry to learn and become better real estate agents. Within Remax, we believe in strength in numbers, where people are open to share their experiences and knowledge with other Remax agents and, of course, the rest of the industry so we can all better serve our clients. So today's topic is the legal challenges during the pandemic. The guest we have today is Richard Bell, partner for Bell Alliance here. So this topic is actually a very crucial one for a lot of us because there's a lot of uncertainty and concerns in terms of your real estate transaction. So let me welcome Richard here on the screen. Hey, Richard, how's it going?
Well, yeah, a number of times we get asked, how's it going? I go, well, how do you think it's going?
Yeah,
I can
sometimes.
say hi to everybody who's logged on to this. May you live in interesting times actually turns out to be a curse as opposed to a proverb. So where would you like to start, Kingsley? I've got some items here that I think folks who are watching really will want to know about.
Right. Well, let's maybe start off with just talk a little bit about yourself and what you do. Just give people a little bit of a background of who you are. We'll start with that.
So I've been practicing for, shall we say, a long time. I could say over 20 years. I could also say over 25 years. So Bell Alliance is a solicitors only firm. We run one of the largest residential conveyancing practices in Vancouver. We have a team here of over 50 people just focused on the solicitor side of the practice. And so we've got we spend a lot of time dealing with the COVID issues that have been popping up.
Right.
And as we all know, it tends to be changes based on press releases. And so we have a press release from the government that often impacts our industry. And therefore, what do we need to do as an industry in terms of working together to try and come up with some solutions? So I think one of the most important things for everyone to understand is we're open for business, as are most law firms and notaries.
Right.
We're open, but not without its challenges.
Right.
To date, we have been able to close every transaction.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
We don't expect that will change in terms of our ability to close a transaction. And I'll talk a little later that on this collapsing, there are some issues around people trying to collapse their deals. But I think that's the most important thing, is to understand that we are closing all of the transactions at this point.
Right.
One of the things that, Kingsley, that we've been a little concerned about is there's been a number of clauses floating around the industry which are trying to deal with what happens if, in fact, this deal can't close because of COVID-19. And most of those clauses have issues of uncertainty about them. Well, it'll close eventually when this is over. Well, what we do know is, from a legal perspective, you need certainty of contract and language that says when this is all over. What does that actually mean?
Right.
And then there's also issues of subjectivity. So what happens if I can't do this, if I can't leave my home? Well, what's the difference between I can't leave? In other words, I'm actually under an order from the minister for me to be stuck in my home, versus I don't feel I can leave. And so we're really trying to stress that you've got to be very, very careful if you use those clauses.
Right.
We're not recommending they be used. We are able to close deals. If for some reason, and I don't think anyone's anticipating this, the whole system shuts down, then there would be a doctrine of frustration at law, where neither party is bound by their obligation, if in fact it's impossible to close a transaction. We certainly do not believe that that is going to be the case. So that's why we caution against using these clauses.
Right. So I mean, it's quite the evolving door. Everything changes almost by the day nowadays, and it must be hard for you guys to kind of keep up with, educate everybody too. And it's a lot of, I guess there's a lot of uncertainty, like we know there's a lot of uncertainty going on, and real estate agents are really, in terms of liability, they're really worried about a lot of stuff, right? Not just closing the deals, but just even dealing with clients and things like that. And how are those waivers or anything like that would work?
Yeah, so we've developed a series of waivers. And at the end, you can feel free to provide my email address. We've circulated them to a number of real estate offices, but we know we haven't been able to get them to everyone. So we spent a lot of time developing waivers that would be used to protect the realtors as well as sellers and potential buyers. And so there's 4 or 5 different waiver forms. Right. So after spending days and hours working on those, we then had a ministerial order, which basically limited the liability of realtors due to when something happens around COVID-19. That ministerial order protects the industry. But what about the buyer and the seller, and are they reluctant to have people coming in? So we've developed waivers that would limit the liability of not only the realtors and the brokerage, but also for buyers and sellers. So as I say, if anybody would like those, they can just reach out to me. We are happy to share them. We're not sort of holding these things close because we think it's all about a partnership between our respective industries. So the order is nice. And incidentally, anybody can actually look at ministerial orders. Just punch it into the website, Ministerial Orders BC, and you'll see the number of orders that have been issued. Nothing in the last couple of days, so it means they've been able to deal with a whole bunch of issues. But you will be able to track it. We track it twice a day. We look first thing in the morning and at the end of the day, and then we share with the industry if there's something that impacts them.
Oh, good. Because a lot of times realtors nowadays don't really do open houses or things like that nowadays, but there are times they must do showings, right? Because there's people moving and things like that. So people are actually looking for a home. And actually there's a lot of debate online, whether it's consumer or in the industry, where, you shouldn't even be telling realtors you should be working because of the issue with the COVID that, someone can catch the virus itself. And what if they have health issues it's hard to trace, but if they go to a showing and then they caught the COVID, what happens then? It's just, I know it's not, you probably can't give an exact answer, but what are the, it's a realtor liable because of it? Or even though there's forms, how much of a liability does that take on them?
Yeah, so the ministerial order helps the real estate industry and brokerages a lot. It does exclude gross negligence, which in our waivers we include removing liability for gross negligence. I always caution people that I'm not sure a court would be too thrilled about upholding a professional who's committed gross negligence. But the waivers still are, so within the industry, the ministerial order is pretty good. But what about your seller or your buyer wanting some protection around this, particularly the seller? If I'm going to allow buyers to come into my home,
exactly,
I want to be removed from liability. So I think there's still value in these waivers. And what we've done is we've got 4 or 5 of these waivers, and then we have a paragraph about each waiver as to how it would be used. So it's really trying to help the industry. The reality of it is and there was a quote from, I think, the leader of Denmark, who said that it's going to be easier to shut down the economy than to start the economy all over again. And so, again, I just don't think we should all be going into the shell and hiding and go, you know what? Because there are people that want to sell and there's people that want to buy. And so we just have to be really sensible as to what precautions. And Kingsley, I'm going to give a plug for my greatest idea that I've come up with so far.
Sure.
Because when I heard this announcement from the leader in Denmark, I thought, we need to start thinking about that, because BC is very fortunate. We're probably more successful than any place else in the world at dealing with these issues. But how do you re-stimulate the economy? And to me, British Columbia, Vancouver in particular, there's two economic engines in this area. One is tourism. We may have a good ski season next year, who knows for sure, but probably tourism is more of a summer event. The other is real estate. So how do you stimulate a real estate market? So I'm throwing out this idea, let's have the provincial government say no property transfer tax for 6 months. Then for the next 6 months, it's half property transfer tax. Because when people are buying and selling, they're buying furniture, they're hiring people to do renovations.
Yeah.
So my belief, if there's the quickest way to reignite our economy is to get that real estate engine, which I suspect most of your listeners are going to be happy to hear that potentially an answer. So lobby again. The board needs to be stepping up. I don't know what they're doing now, but I don't see a lot of the board on the media. Law Society is doing a little bit, but again, everyone has to step up and start to think about how does this recover, because that's going to be the challenge.
And recovery is the most important part of this, because it's business will likely not be the same, right? When this is off too, and there has to be some stimulation, because a lot of people think of real estate as just buy and sell, but it's like you said, it's much more than that. It has to do with labor, construction, law firms, property managers, and everything, because it's like a ripple effect, right? So that's why, especially in BC, where we rely both on tourism and real estate, but whereas Alberta, there's a little bit of oil, but even then, that industry is not going that well too, right? And the only province that it's been having a good market is the Manitoba market, which they actually been up quite a bit throughout the past year. But overall, real estate is still one of the pillars, especially in Western Canada, for that drives the economy overall. So it's like good suggestion that you have there, and hopefully somebody is listening out there.
Because it really it is going to be so tough to pick people up and get them feeling positive again, and so that's where the opportunity lies, quite frankly. Exactly. One of the other things that I did want to talk about, Kingsley, is, and I'm sure some of your realtors are dealing with the issue of collapsing transactions. And so we get a number of inquiries. I've personally dealt with probably 5 different buyer scenarios where they were looking at collapsing. And I think what we try and really stress for the buyers is that there are significant consequences should you fail to complete. As we all know, the deposit would be forfeited. But if the market slides a bit, and in fact the seller resells and loses more than just the deposit, the buyer is going to be liable for that as well. And so that damage can be significant. And then, and I haven't seen case authority on this yet, but you sort of wonder, so that buyer doesn't close, the seller actually is under a contract to buy another property to move to. That seller can't close and they incur damages. So do those damages flow through to that buyer at the start of the chain? And is that too remote? And I would argue, no, it's not too remote. I think that there is a direct connection between that first buyer failing and therefore the seller on their transaction having damages as well. So we've had, I personally have dealt with 5 different scenarios and clients, and 4 of the 5 did decide that they could manage to be able to close. The other one, simply financially, the circumstances were they just couldn't do it. And I said, well, if you can't do it, then you can't do it.
You can't do it financially. That's just hard, black and white, I guess.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
that sense.
So it's
Do you
so I
see?
think it's important to understand the potential consequences for buyers. They maybe feel a little shaky, but still, that liability could be significant.
Right. Do you see, buyers, having that financial challenge coming in the coming months if this continue on? Just your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that's, I think that there are more job losses coming. Some industries can carry on for a period of time, and I look at law firms and notary firms that do real estate conveyancing. We had a very, very healthy start to the year. The market, January, February, early March, lots and lots of activity. So we're fully functional for April. May will still be fairly strong, but what happens with June and July closings? And again, this goes to deals can still be done. I think we need to recognize that Vancouver and British Columbia has seen cycles before. This is a different type of cycle, the consequences, but people still want to sell, need to sell. Buyers still want to buy. So I think I'm hearing some creative things that are happening out there. A little bit more use of video content for showing. So the person who really is interested in the property at least has a good sense. I've heard of sellers getting inspections done in advance and providing those to potential buyers. So again, I don't think we should go into hiding here. We should try and be creative. But I do believe there are still more job losses coming that will create challenges. But when you have a down market, there are those folks that go, you know what, the Warren Buffett strategy, now's a good time to buy. And, it's a bit of an overused phrase in the industry, but there are people that have to sell and people that want to buy. So I think we just need to be a little creative and cautious.
Right. And even from our statistics in April, March, the month March was actually overall from Western Canada here is actually very busy. In comparison to last March, it's actually more busier. Like you indicated, in April, we're expecting to be a little bit slow, but there's still quite a bit of transactions to be completed on, from our point of view too. But May and onwards is probably the one that we have to be careful and look at, right? Because that's when the market's, well, it's usually what happens now. The result will come 2 months later, a month or two later, right? So those are the uncertainty months, and hopefully the COVID situation doesn't last any longer than May or June, right? So things.
And as we know, because we're all watching the news all too often, is that BC is weathering this better than most, and there's still a few months of being really cautious, but directionally, we're heading in the right direction. And again, I go back to that's why we need to start thinking about what is it that will cause us to recover sooner than later. And that's why the discussion around solutions should be taking place now. Yeah. And I think it has to be driven by the industry because government is still just trying to play catch up. Right. This is a major change from previous downturns in the market. So the other thing I guess I did want to mention, I'm getting lots of calls on the issue of tenants.
Yes.
That's a biggie. And I guess if there's one thing everyone needs to know is you can't get rid of a tenant except in very, very small circumstances. If we look at what the process sort of normally is that if someone's buying and the buyer wants to be able to get possession because they're going to move in, there is the notice that goes to the tenant and they get 2 months notice and 3 months rent. If the tenant doesn't move out, you can go and get an order for possession from the residential tenancy branch, and that's usually just done through a conference process. And if the tenant doesn't move out, you then make an application to the BC Supreme Court for a writ of possession, which directs the sheriff to take action to physically remove the tenant. And so physical is something that's not available as an option. So essentially, if the tenant decides not to move, the tenant doesn't have to move, except there is a list. And again, this shows up in one of the ministerial orders of extreme examples where you could have them move. So notices that were given before March 30th were deemed to be valid. And that's all very nice, but if the tenant decides to stay, there's nothing you can do about that until the emergency is over. What we don't know currently is, say you gave that legitimate notice on March 29th, which is the 2 months notice, and let's assume that 2 months later, the emergency rules are canceled. Do they have to move out right away? The next day, the next month, 2 months? We just don't know, and I just don't think they've addressed that issue yet. One of the things that we have talked to realtors about is the use of a mutual agreement to end the tenancy. The use of that document would give some sense of what the tenant intends to do.
Okay.
But at the very last minute, the tenant could change their mind. And they could say, yeah, I know I've signed it, but I really didn't understand that I had the opportunity to say no. And so we have seen situations where they start to hesitate, and checkbook comes out, and they are incentivized to make the move. But that is a challenge. You just don't know. The mutual agreement to end a tenancy gives you an indication that, yes, thank you very much, we do intend to move out, we're going to be moving home, or we're going to go back to our community we grew up in, or what. So that discussion at least will give some level of comfort. But again, if they decide at the last minute not to move, you can't get them out.
That'll become a challenge, I can see a couple of months down the road because of it. Because it's always a challenge, but it's especially during these times, it's gonna, and it's also all like an evolving door almost, right? So many uncertainties. Realtors just have to be more knowledgeable in terms of speaking with people like yourself, to get the most up-to-date information to understand how to handle the situation then, right? So that's one of the advices I would give. So we're coming to the end of this, and usually we ask the person, what kind of RE/MAX hustle tip you would give. So typically the RE/MAX hustle tip is something that it's something that's more catered to what you do, your experience, that you can teach, and one thing that people should adapt to, especially during these times. Anything that people can learn about and follow. And is there what would be the Richard's RE/MAX hustle tip for people?
Yeah, so remain calm. Remain calm. I mean, it really is. That's my best advice for everyone. And don't watch the news so much. Maybe in the morning, the end of the day, but turn it off. But yeah, so remain calm and be creative. I think there is still business to be done out there, and the longer we can continue to engage with our clients to talk about this too will pass. We've got to be prepared to come out of this quickly. Otherwise, the damage is going to linger for months and months and months.
Right. Yeah. So usually what we do is we take a look at the chat group here to see if we have any immediate questions that we can go over. So let me just take a look here. So one of the questions here is from Angela Ford. The question is, what are some of the options when it comes to showing a property with a tenant and the tenant does not want to allow access? What options does the seller have?
Zero. There are no options.
There are no options.
Yeah, the tenant ministerial orders basically said the tenant must consent under these emergency measures.
Right.
So maybe pull out the checkbook.
Pull up the checkbook and
As we all know in our respective industries, every once in a while you got to pull out the checkbook.
Right. That's true. That's true. So that's it for now. So if there's anybody that have any questions for Richard, you can email him at rbell@bellalliance.ca. And actually, I'll put that in the under the chat group. So if anybody wants to contact you for more information, they can send you the email. Okay. Yep. Well, thank you for your time, Richard, and that was really helpful for a lot of us. And because there's we get questions every day on our end too, so you helped us kind of clear a lot of the uncertainty questions that people ask us. But thank you, and stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one. Okay.
You guys. Okay. Bye now.